try to put this in the context of theology. The fathers of the Council of Trent in the 1500s said, we still suffer from the effects of original sin. Some might say, well, that's just a rationalization. I don't think so. I do believe that there are things, and I defer to the psychologists for this, that I'm not sure, let me ask you a professional opinion. If there is evil, there are things, can we ever get to the bottom essence of it? What do you think?
I think there are many people in the field of psychology and behavioral science who probably wouldn't use the term evil because they regard that as more the domain of metaphysics and spirituality. I don't. I regard evil as a reality that exists in our world. Right. And so I do think, and we had this conversation, my brother and I had this conversation yesterday about grace builds on nature. Right. But I think evil builds on nature too. Meaning that if people's lives have been characterized by abuse, neglect, fragility, vulnerability, they're more likely to engage in behaviors that we would regard as evil. And so, I think it's similar to that.
There's all sorts of things, like I referred to Mr. Rodriguez, so I love like a father. We call St. Francis our seraphic father.
That's right.
Is that a shot at my father? Deep down, I hope it's not. But I also know that feelings are morally neutral, and that you feel what you feel.
Not good or bad, that's right.
And in the final analysis, as far as I'm concerned, I can't go all the way down that rabbit hole when there's so many other rabbit holes that are more important. And I only have a finite number of times, so I put it in God's hands. I pray for my father. I offer masses for my father. If you ask me, am I still angry? Well, I told Gerard this. Do you remember, like 2 years ago, I told you that I actually had a dream that I had a fight with that, or at least I put. Oh, yeah. No, it wasn't that. I said, he was looking at me, and I said, "Are you going to hit me?"
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, okay. And I don't know why I had that dream, but I put it in God's hands. And
yeah.
And it could be that I believe, obviously, as a Catholic, in the communion of saints and the connection between all the living and all the dead, and I took that in a sense as he needs prayers, because God's experience of time in heaven, I believe, is so different than ours. So, I put things in God's hands, and I continue my journey. When I was ordained a priest, I took Hebrews 5:2 as my almost every priest.
I love that.
When he's ordained, will put out a
memorial like a mass card. Yeah.
And so I picked Hebrews 5:2. Hebrews 5:2 says, "He's able to deal patiently with errant sinners, for he himself is beset by weakness."
Yeah, I love that.
I wouldn't have picked me for a priest, but God did. And I love it. Yeah, with the exception of celibacy. And I'm working on that to change that rule.
On that, right?
But anyway, but it's been quite a journey. And just one other thing, Archbishop Sheen, I don't know if you remember, he was a great priest. He was asked once if he could do things over again, would he become a priest? And he said, "Oh no." "What do you mean, Archbishop? You always spoke highly of the priesthood." "Oh, priesthood is great, but I don't want to go through life again." He says, "Once is enough."
Once is enough, yeah.
And I think what Augustine said, our hearts are restless till they rest in God. I believe, with the exception of Scripture, I believe no words were ever more inspired than those words by Augustine. Yeah. Because it's true. I've never met anybody who's been totally happy. There's always something that you want.
There's a wonderful notion I came across in the field of psychology, which I have really so appreciated, and it really was developed by a researcher at Stanford University who oversaw a project called the Forgiveness Project. And he looked at not the moral or ethical characteristics of forgiveness, but the medical health benefits of forgiveness. What happens to those people who forgive in terms of their health, right? But he developed a notion that I have found to be one of the most helpful notions in my work, called a grievance story. That we all develop grievance stories in our lives, your mother didn't give you what you needed to, your father hurt you, your brother stole your girlfriend, your best friend cheated on you. And sometimes the sins are real. they're real bad things that have happened. Sometimes they grow out of your own dissatisfaction with a relationship and you interpret something as painful. But those grievance stories often are immutable. They stay for years. You haven't talked to your brother in 30 years. How come? It's 30 years ago. Have you tried? No. Why not? Well, we just haven't talked to each other. It stays immutable, right? I think going through this conversation reminds us that there were many grievance stories I think I have in my life. Some of them have to do with the failures of my father, right? That he wasn't there for us in a way. I certainly think the grievance story contributed to me trying to be a very different kind of father than he was to my kids. And sometimes you can do that willfully. Sometimes you can be intentional. Most of the times you enact it without even wanting to. You know, my wife Kelly has a pillow on our bed that her friend Felicia gave her that says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, I am my mother after all." Sometimes you become that person. You reenact and introject parts of them, right? Bruce Springsteen had this wonderful interview with Terry Gross a number of years ago, which I loved, and Terry Gross is a great interviewer for NPR. And he said, she asked about his songwriting, and he talked about what he called the flotsam and the jetsam of life, right? The stuff I pull on and the stuff I throw off. Those are nautical terms. And that's what I am so struck by whenever you and I have these conversations. The stuff we hold on and the stuff we cast off, you know, the flotsam and the jetsam. I mean, I think if everybody had a chance to tell your story to yourself and to someone who's listening. One of the things I've asked my son to do, when he went to college, I wrote him 45, that's called Lessons from Dad. I typed out this 45 lessons I hoped he learned from me. And I said many of them you might have seen me do, but most of them I felt short. But one of them was, every day in your life, spend some time thinking about your own narrative. Where did you come from? What's your story? Because it's always there with you. And sometimes your story is what leads you to behave badly to other people, or it makes you expect something you shouldn't expect, or it makes you feel offended by something. So that grievance story concept, I have to say, it's helped me so much in thinking about trying to not hold on to those grievance stories as much as we can. Gabe and I have been really good with each other too, because we talk a lot, he and I, and we help each other a lot with our grievance stories, you know.
The greatest homilist I ever heard is still alive. He's like 103, 104 years old. Monsignor Jim Turo. He was a professor and a wonderful man, a scholar, a scripture scholar. His homilies lasted like 35, 45, maybe 1 seconds or 1 minute. Tremendous. He always evoked a response. So when he was coming out for Mass, you knew you better listen. Because if you don't listen, you ain't going to get it.
You're missing it.
And so I like to think I'm a popular homilist, not because I'm good, but because I'm short. And the people like that, because they know that you're not going to go on and on. But the reason why I said that, Turo is also an author, as I might have alluded to. In one of his books, he wrote, "In the sacraments, God and his people come fiercely together." That word fiercely. And I'm reminded of the beauty of the sacraments. In fact, if you ask me, what's my favorite sacrament? What's the favorite thing I do? It's not saying Mass, that's second. Even more than that, I enjoy confessions. And I'll tell you what, I was a newly ordained priest. I'm not sure I told you this story. And one of my classmates from, I don't know, it was Patterson or Trenton, called me. We were ordained maybe 3 weeks. And he said, "Gabe, listen, I got to tell you something." And he was kind of asking my advice on this. And, you know, I realized afterwards, and he did, that he was absolutely right in what he did. So he had a wake service, and it was his first wake service in that parish. So the director, the funeral director, welcomed him. And he said, "Hi, Father, welcome. Come on in. I hear you're new in the parish. What can I do for you?" He says, "Well, after the wake service, I'd like to offer confession. So can I do that?" He says, "I have no one else here, so I'll put you in the next room and I'll set up chairs for you. No problem at all." So he finishes his prayer service, the rosary, or whatever it was. And he had one confession. So this beautiful woman, maybe 25, 30 years old, comes in, very nicely dressed, and she started to shake. And the priest said, "Gabe, I knew instinctively it was an abortion. I knew it." So he said to the woman, how can I help you? He said, Father, I did something that I can't tell you. He says, why don't you sit down? And he held her hand. He says, listen, no matter what you tell me, God will forgive you. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you absolution anyway. So even if you don't tell me. And that was the question he had of me afterwards. It turns out he was right to do that. But he said, but if you tell me what you did, I promise you'll feel better. And then she just opened up and said, Father, I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about that life it was on. And okay, he said, look, everything's in God's hands. Put in God's hands. He gave her absolution. So he called me. He said, Gabe, I don't know if I did the right thing by saying, I said, look, I'll check with a sacramental theologian, a canon lawyer. My gut feeling is you did. Because if people are not emotionally able to do something, then it's not expected that they do. And he was absolutely right in what he did. But the reason why I bring that up is because of the beauty of the sacraments. And so there's a healing, in my own life when I think of what my father did and the relationship and the harm, I try to put that in the context that me as a man, as a Catholic, as a priest, as a minister of the sacrament of confession, I have to follow my own preaching. And it's been a struggle. I hope I see my Father in heaven, and I hope there's no fear in heaven. I can't believe that there is in heaven, but I believe that there is heaven with no fear and only love. It's been a struggle, and that's why I've always felt, even in person of St. Francis, from what I read about St. Francis, he was not a man of peace in a lot of ways. He struggled with a lot of things. He would throw himself into thorn bushes. He would put ashes on his food. He would use a log as a pillow just for personal asceticism. But he always preached joy. And he told his followers, if you're not joyful, don't come to the community, go to confession, whatever it is. When you've solved that problem, come back. And I think that's the Catholics, or that's the Christian, and I would hope everybody, that if you try to live a joyful life and not go after perfect peace, because you're not going to get perfect peace, what St. Augustine said. Right. I think that that's a good way of doing it. Anyway,